Yeah, a really exciting panel, hopefully. And can I encourage the people who are listening and watching this to put in their questions, because it's very much about giving you an opportunity to ask the questions that you want from our fantastic panel of experts. So just to introduce myself, I'm Beth Hewitt. I'm the creative director down at our Media City campus for the University of Salford, and I work across all the programs and the curriculum and linking up with industry, trying to think about what's coming up next. So this is a very appropriate panel, I think, and a really good panel discussion to be having. Before we go any further, I'll do a bit of an intro to the panel first. So we'll get them to introduce themselves. So Diva first.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Diva Rodriguez, and I'm a digital producer at ITV Studios, working in Northern Productions. So that encompasses everything from continuing drama like Emmerdale, Coronation Street, to entertainment, factual, Rinder, and new productions that will be springing up.
Thanks, Diva. And now over to Juan.
Hi, hello. Well, many thanks for inviting me. Very happy to be here. I'm a senior lecturer in interactive media and design at the University of Salford. I am also the program leader of our undergraduate program in digital media. I have a background in design and art, but I'm also a programmer, so I'm kind of one of those weird guys like moving between disciplines. And I'm also a researcher, so my research focuses mostly on virtual heritage and digital heritage. Yeah.
Thanks, Juan. And last but not least, Rachel.
Hi everybody, I'm Rachel Cummins. I work at McCann Manchester, and I am the MD of what we call Craft, which is McCann's production division. I've been with McCann for 25 years, so I've had one employer, but many careers, as it were, within that employer, which we can talk a little bit about today.
Brilliant, thanks Rachel. So we've got quite an eclectic panel, which is really good because hopefully we'll be able to sort of look at all the different aspects of everything that's digital and tech. So we're basically in this panel, we want to look at how employers are preparing themselves, and also what are the tips for employees and new entrants at all the different levels. What do we think the skills are, the experiences that are going to be needed over the next 3 to 5 years? Absolutely knowing also that we don't know what sort of jobs and roles will necessarily exist, or probably more accurately what they're going to be called, and those names and that terminology. So Rachel, I just wonder if you could sort of set the landscape by kind of saying, in your view, how you think things have changed over the last 5 to 10 years, to sort of put a little bit of context in this.
Yeah. Okay. I think I'll start by kind of just talking a little bit about kind of the environment that I work in. So McCann is an advertising agency, part of the McCann World Group, so global brand. And I've been in the industry for such a long time, and I can quite honestly say between the last 10 or 5 years in particular, the nature of the business has changed at such a pace. I mean, in 2015, I moved from a client service background. So my background was working with clients on brand and creative strategies, focusing on high volume retail pieces of business. So the likes of Aldi, Matalan, as well as brands like Durex, you name it. I've pretty much worked across every category there is. However, around 2015, the advent of content, all things content, what is content, dawned on us, and we made the decision to build a small photography studio in-house to service some of our retail clients. I can almost mark it to the day, April 2015, the floodgates opened. We started to do some tabletop photography, and the world completely changed. And now within Manchester, if someone had told me when I was an account exec I'd be running a 30,000 square foot film and photography studio in an advertising agency, I probably would never have gone for the job interview. I would have ran away and hid under a rock somewhere. However, it has changed so rapidly. And what I'm finding now is that the people that we're looking for within the agency, we don't really know what to call them, because in the past, advertising agencies, especially big global giants, had what we call a vertical structure. So you had print managers, TV producers, digital designers, web designers, and it was very kind of siloed is quite harsh, but there was a very vertical model. However, what we've seen particularly, and the pace is increasing, is a convergence of all of those skill sets. And I'm now getting CVs through of candidates who, when I see their CV, I could put them anywhere because they've got so many different dimensions and strings to the bow. And rather than coming up with specific titles and kind of pigeonholing the teams, we've actually, as an agency, moved forward to calling the producers kind of makers. So you can be a creative maker, whether that's with photography or film or animation or 3D design. So that way they can flex and grow as the needs grow. So it's almost impossible. If I could go into work one day and think, I know what I'm going to face today, that'd be brilliant, but also I'd probably get bored. But one day is never the same, and the roles are constantly changing, and that has definitely increased pace with the advent of content.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. From there, and sort of picking up a little bit as well, Diva, on what Rachel was talking about, what do you see and what have you found in your roles of sort of the connectivity of specialisms and how important that is, and that idea of collaborative working, problem solving, design thinking actually being across most roles, and how does that impact?
I think just following on from what Rachel has said, the booming of content creation has really kind of changed the landscape for so many different industries. And that kind of comes down to the heart of how we as a society consume technology. And as technology grows and it builds, so does our interest and our appetite. And it changes the way in which we kind of do our day to day. And specifically talking about what, what I do in television, it's changed the way people watch TV. It changes the amount of television that they watch. And it's also expanding their interests into things that they had never really thought about. People are looking at cross genres. Someone who maybe loved entertainment is also looking at sport in a different way, because there's a breadth of content and sub-content in genres that people can kind of explore. So with this kind of boom of invention on the tech side of it, on the content side of it, also comes the idea of invention within all of us. And I think we now have the capability of all becoming content makers, whether that is for an organization or whether that is for yourself. These entrepreneurial skills are becoming even more prevalent and even more needed. The consumer appetite changes, the business changes. So when we're talking about how that all kind of fits into a business, we are looking for people who have those cross-platform skills, who have that breadth of knowledge that can place them into different places. So as the industries change and pivot, so do our teams as well. There's opportunity, as Rachel said, to flex and grow. So what we're seeing is a lot of people coming on board, especially in the world of television, who they want to make things, and they want to make things that are with purpose. They want to make things that have longevity. And we're able to connect people based on their interests within relevant parts of how we create content in the business. So you may be someone who really loves problem solving, you love puzzles. So we can put you in a position that maybe you never actually thought about, which is a strategist. Or you might be someone who's really interested in how people think, and you never thought about community management and social media engagement. And I think more and more we're finding people who are becoming more passionate, not only about the industry, television itself, but also in digital and what digital means for them and what they can contribute.
Great, thanks, Diva. It is really fascinating, actually, because it's clearly so changed from a decade ago. And I just want to come to Juan now to sort of talk about, I know it's one of his big things, really, talking about the need for the tech and the creative minds, and how it's kind of actually merging, and the need to have both, but also that collaborative way of working. So within HE, this is a really important sort of theme that we discuss. Juan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is completely true that things change at a very rapid pace. So for us, for example, we are in the university trying to teach the skills that they will need. Is of course very difficult, because you're teaching them basically the skills that you don't know very well what they will need. So the things that probably we have in our programs won't be the ones that they will be using. The software will change, the kind of products that they will developing will change, the kind of roles will change, everything will change. So one of the challenges that we are facing is preparing these new generations for their careers for change, and not just for adapting and acquiring new skills, but also to start enjoying that process. Is something that if you don't enjoy doing it, probably you're in the wrong industry, because your role, the definition of what you do will be constantly changing. Now, in this part, I think one of the key points is what Beth was saying about creating a community of learning, a community of collaboration, where people are sharing their knowledge, are sharing their skills. Something that instead of being your treasure that you somehow you have to keep hidden from others, so it projects your career, what actually projects your career is being able to share your knowledge with others. And you see those communities everywhere in the digital landscape, for example, with blogs, with YouTube videos, with forums, Wikipedia. Actually, I don't need to teach them skills, because I know that you going into YouTube, for example, my students will acquire the skills themselves if I teach them how to do it. So probably that's one of the main things that we're teaching, like breaking that sort of inertia of thinking that we have to teach them everything.
Thanks, Juan. I'm just sort of, I've got some more questions, but just pulling it back very briefly, do people want to have kind of a thought on what are the jobs of the future? You know, the specifics, because obviously we're now talking about, you know, the attributes, and in some ways some of those sort of more softer skills. But what is it we think will be the jobs of the future? And are we, you know, I'm talking kind of within the next 3 years as opposed to the next 10 years. Rachel, do you want to?
Yeah. It's like the $1 million question, isn't it? But I think whilst the world is changing, there are some constants that I think we will always need, particularly in production and in creative production. So what we're finding now is a shift from traditional kind of client management skills to project management, and the type of project management, because long gone are the days where you've got your 30-second TV ad and everything revolves around that. I mean, there's an ecosystem of content that needs producing, and that can be from web builds right through to digital, to YouTube vids, to stills, and you name it. And where we're seeing significant growth is for project management. And when I talk about project management, that is technical project management, so about the technologies as much as understanding the importance of the creative milestones and getting everybody involved. So what I'm seeing is in the past and recent past, production and was always seen as almost the engine room, the back room. The glory shot was with the creative. However, those makers have now come forward. They are now the frontline workers, amplified through COVID as well, because you've still got to get that TV ad out there, and you can have the best script in the world, but if you can't get it made, it's not going on air. So we've seen an absolute shift in the emphasis on the role of project management and the importance of it. And then also the role for those people to be able to navigate the idiosyncratic personalities that come along in the creative world, because they are emotional beings, because they're making something fantastic. So in the past, you might have, I'm a client manager, I'm friendly, and you know, I can translate strategies so that the clients are understanding it, versus the technical project manager who's, you know, is a little bit more reserved potentially. So however, what we've seen is that the whole project management industry is now absolutely critical. And whether you call them T-shaped or Y-shaped, we have started to look for people who are more than just a TV producer, more than just a technology workflow specialist. It's kind of trying to find the jack of all trades. However, I still believe that there is a role for specialisms, because some of these tasks are so big and so technical in certain areas that you can't wing it. But there's definitely project management, and the value of project management, a strong producer will keep going. and the value of creative thinking will keep going. Just what they're making will change. That's why I quite like the notion of makers, because it's all encompassing and it's not pigeonholing anybody, especially as most of the people that we're recruiting now have dual lives, dual jobs. And we were talking yesterday, weren't we, as a team, that half of them are influencers or running a sideline, and it's impossible to almost compartmentalize people as an employer, because the team want diversity. They want to see where they can go and where they can grow. It's no longer just a single ambition.
Brilliant. Diva, have you got anything to kind of add into that mix before we move on to the next question?
I think Rachel has summed it up really well, because, you know, regardless of what industry that you're in, when we're talking about tech and digital as a whole, those project management skills are critical in, you know, maneuvering some of the biggest things that can be done in any particular industry, from big stunts to massive creative campaigns, to even something as what seems simple enough, managing a Facebook page. There's so much intricacy that is involved when it comes to of digital. One thing I would like to add to that is an understanding of big data is a massive, massive draw, because as our habits and our way in which we consume changes, we need people who are interested in understanding why that happens and how that continues to change. So being able to have that analytical ability to say, I want to see where tech and where audience kind of come together is really, really critical. So if you've got an interest in problem solving, in understanding what makes people tick, that is such an incredible skill that you should shine and talk about more often, because it can be used as we move towards analyzing big data in a way that really we are just a data set, aren't we?
Thanks. That's, yeah, we are just a data set. Well, there you go. We could have called it that, actually. Juan, just picking up on what Diva was saying there about the kind of the big data, and how important is that in your teaching, and how kind of aware do you try and make the students of this and the importance of the data and data analysis? And
yeah, it's something that we bring in more and more into the program, in the way that the students can get engaged with tools to understand data. One of the things that we're looking at the future is that the volume of the data that is being collected is just massive. So the main concern, the main challenge for the future is how you make sense of it. Not how to collect so much data, because we already have, and we are collecting like volumes of this. It's more about how to make sense. And so as designers, as makers, as you put it, we can play a big role into actually making that understandable, making sense of it. I also want to say, like, I think that from the technical side, playing like being a futurologist a little bit, the future, I see the future as more and more screenless. So without the screens, the emerging technologies like VR, like AR, will play a fundamental role in what's coming. And the other bit that also I see that will shape what's coming in the future is this interactivity, the interrelationship between things, between objects, which is also related with what you both were saying about the data, because at the end, the sharing of data between objects will create completely different technological landscapes. And yeah, to end, I really like what Rachel was saying about the makers. I love to put us as makers. I remember very old discussions when we were we need to move from the Homo sapiens that we are to the Homo fabers, which are where we are. We are sapiens because we are able to do things, right? And on that point, the ability to make things also needs to be connected to the ability to negotiate or to navigate between a problem space solving and a solution solving. So it's like those two spaces that connect to each other through making, which are so relevant. That's, yeah.
Brilliant, exciting. I want to come on the course. Just in terms, Rachel and Diva, in terms of what Juan's been talking about, what would you say to you know, education providers and HE? You know, we want more of this, we want this, we like that approach, but actually you've got it wrong there. Are there any Are there any thoughts on that? Because I know we're starting and launching in September, as you know, 3 HNDs around the creative and digital media technologies, which is really exciting and very much linked to employers and employability. But to get that right, I think that input, I don't know how much you value that input of employers into the programs and the students that are coming out at the other end in a way. Rachel, do you want to?
Yeah, funnily enough, we were discussing this. I was discussing this with my colleagues this morning and kind of had a suspicion you might ask me this question. And we were in terms of what you do at a technical level, you're giving the teams the tools to do the jobs that are of the now, really, and that's great. But when we are interviewing the candidates or looking for a new recruit, there's always that extra dimension of, if you can operate a piece of software or whatever that might be, but actually it's putting some of the softer skills in there in terms of the fascination and encouraging them to kind of to continue to think about reinvention and to almost encourage individuals to not be so focused that it's only a one stream of consciousness. So and what we're looking for is some form of engagement when we see the potential candidates, for instance, because it'll be what inspires you, what does that technology make you feel, because that technology will be redundant probably in 2 years' time, but it's more about what is driving those people as individuals and what else they're doing outside of the course that makes it feel like a compelling story. Because more and more as an agency and as an agency network, we're really thinking about diversity, inclusion and sustainability and health and well-being, and actually we're seeing everything in a much more 360 view, including every candidate. So you can be the best, say for instance, you could be the best animator in the world, but you might have no appreciation for the render side of the business or whatever it might be, and we're encouraging everybody to understand, yes, their sweet spot, but also what else exists around that, so that you can get the best out of the team or work more closely, because it's absolutely imperative now that those silos are gone and you have to be able to work and appreciate other disciplines, even if you don't understand it.
Great, thanks, Rachel. That's yeah, really, I'll clock all that. But Diva, just sort of taking on what Rachel was saying there, and when we had a conversation, you were talking, which I loved about, you all talked about it actually, the passion, the need for passion, and you also talked about the need for personal brands. So I wonder if you could kind of take the sort of what should HE be doing, what should educators be doing, and think about it in that context.
I think what would be great to see is more of the three shows, if you will: exploration, innovation, and imagination. And those three, I think, are very critical, because tech is more than just a need. It's a desire, it's an interest. And in the world of digital, having those passions are really, really critical. And these passions don't necessarily have to be linked to something very hard and tangible right now. If you have an interest in something, explore it. And I think to see people who are a little bit more daring, a little bit more bold, not afraid of trying something and questioning what failure and success means, again, it's going back to those entrepreneurial skills of just saying, I'm passionate about trying something new, and I'm passionate about seeing what that outcome is. And to have people that feel comfortable and brave enough to be able to take that leap, as tech does, as digital does, would be great to see those individuals coming into the employment arena a bit more.
Brilliant, fantastic. Just to say to everybody who's listening and on this session, do ask some questions, because I think we've got some amazing panelists here who could probably answer your questions. I'm still trying to tease out of them, what are these job roles going to be called? What might we, and I guess that shows how fixed I am. Actually, we have to break down those barriers. Perhaps there aren't any names. Perhaps jobs become something a bit more than a specific and a name. And do we need a name? So
yeah, I think that's interesting actually, because what we've seen with a number of our clients is they know they're missing something, but they don't know what it is. So they've started to do this process of safaris. So they're approaching agencies to understand how are we tackling retail challenges? How are we have a joke around briefs that are one content please, because they know, the clients know that they need content, but they don't know where to start. Who do I brief? Is it my media agency? Is it my creative team? And I think sometimes we don't know what roles are missing, and actually there's an absolute value in industry coming together to kind of learn from each other and understand what are the key things that are keeping you up at night, and how did you solve them, and how can we learn, because it's all transferable from industry to industry really. And it is hard to come up with a name, and like I was saying with CVs, I find it difficult to categorize some of the more recent candidates, but at the same time, within McCann, we have a high retention rate. So you have to take the team that have been there for a long time and are used to a certain way of working and bring them on that journey. And actually, change management is really key. And that is an absolute skill that you could prepare your teams with. What does change management mean? Because all of these enthusiastic students, whether they're lifelong learners or kind of the new generation, they will be met with if they come in all bold and excitement, there will be an element of, oh, things are changing, I don't like it. And actually that skill of negotiation and what have you. The other thing is, work is hard, isn't it, some days, and particularly in a pandemic and keeping going. And actually there's an element of real world teaching that needs to take place, of resilience and tenacity and kind of quality of mind, I suppose, because particularly in a creative industry, it's a labor of love a lot of the time, and we don't keep regular hours. And sometimes I think it would help if that was brought out in HE terms, because it can be a shock to the system. I remember my first 6 months in advertising, I think I went to bed every night as soon as I walked to the door in shock about what was going on around me, whilst I lit, because I'd been in a cosseted environment of Loughborough, and it was just the real world. However, I do think we've come a long way since then, and actually the rules of engagement have changed, but it's a labour of love a lot of the time.
Brilliant. I can see a hand up. I don't know whether it's a hand up because somebody wants to ask a question, which is Lucy Hill. I don't know whether you want to ask a question, Lucy, or you've just got a hand up. But if you do want to ask a question, perhaps type it in the chat, or I don't know whether Becky's putting her on speaker so that she could be unmuted. But any thoughts? No.
Am I okay can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you. Sorry. It's a lot easier to kind of explain. Basically, I'm a final year in broadcast journalism at Salford University. As much as I've enjoyed the degree, I really don't want a career in journalism. Like, I'm kind of like, nah, not for me. I've actually since taken up a PR module, which I'm really enjoying, and I was actually headhunted on LinkedIn yesterday for a job in PR full time. I was like, oh my God, that's literally my dream job. Unfortunately, right job, wrong time. I just wanted to ask, what kind of, I mean, I feel a bit of a rabbit at the headlights already, and I'm graduating in 4 months, and it's really scary. But in a creative industry, what are the main qualities you're really looking for? And how have you I suppose kind of adapted to the pandemic that we're all going through at the moment?
Great question, Lucy. I don't know, Juan, can we just start with you from a sort of HE point of view, what you would be saying, and then move on to Diva in terms of, you know, your thoughts for that, and Rachel.
Yeah, no, I would take on what Rachel was saying about this breaking up the silos and the ability to navigate between different disciplines. I think that that's so important. I think what we need to teach now is about this idea of like flexible knowledges, where actually you navigate between, there's no just boundaries really on what you do. About the question, I think it is not unusual that we have people like finishing their degrees and discovering paths that sometimes can be a little bit at odds with what you were doing. So that's something that happens sometimes when you're leaving uni, and sometimes happens when you are after a couple of years in your career, that you want to change. So what I would say there is, if you want to make that shift, then start looking for the kind of elements that you could bring into your portfolio, so you made that happen basically as soon as possible. So if it's PR, like what kind of things I can put in my portfolio, or I can bring from what I already have, that will put you in that path.
And interrupting there, Juan, but I think as well, Lucy, if you know what Rachel was saying before, and Diva, it is about the passion. It is about the ability to project manage. Now, project managing, I know you will have created your own stuff. You'll have worked in teams. You'll have probably led teams. All those sort of things are taking you in that direction. So actually, it's a value in so many different ways. So, you know, you could have done broadcast journalism, or you could have done, you know, politics and contemporary history, but still have the qualities and the assets that the world of digital technology is looking for. So, Diva, I don't know, do you want to come in on that?
No, I think it's a great question. And having experience in PR, one of the things that I would say is really, really valuable is your ability to communicate and to network. And you've identified a position that you think, oh, this is great, I love it, but I'm not just there yet. So why don't you just say hi, and why don't you actually introduce yourself and kind of get to know the landscape a bit better by networking with the individuals that you do want to work with, or that you do have aspirations of becoming. I think that's really, really critical, because going back to what Juan said about, you know, sharing of knowledge, taking that out from a, you know, a higher education point of view and going into the, you know, the industry, or any industry whatsoever, you have some skill sets that are really valuable, and you coming from things at a different way. So your new perception and your way of thinking could be really, really valuable for any employer. So just because you may not be there just yet for that particular role, just say hi and get yourself out there, and let people know that you are ready to kind of move in that direction. You never know where that might lead you. You might end up being a person who helps to create a brand new position based on, you know, what you're passionate about and what you're interested in. And if we go back to the original point of what are those jobs of the future, well, you know, I've been working in digital production now for 20 years, and I've had, gosh, probably about 15 different job titles, and my job continues to grow. And after, you know, within the last 5 years alone, I have had a hand in shaping my own role, and I've had a hand in shaping other roles, you know, beyond what I do. So don't feel powerless. Get out there, say hi, and showcase your incredible abilities of being able to communicate, very valuable in PR, and your networking.
Brilliant, thanks, Diva. And Lucy, you know, I'm so proud and pleased that you've asked the question today. You started your networking already, so they'll remember the name Lucy Hill. Will both Diva and Rachel. So you're doing it, and I think, you know, whatever you've studied and whatever you've developed and those skills you've developed will, I think, as Diva said, they can take you in so many directions. And where you are today and where you'll be in 10 years' time, you know, perhaps, you know, it's the joining up of the dots, as Steve Jobs said. So I think, yeah, well done for raising your hand and asking that question, Lucy.
From Lucy, your point of view, sorry, let me, is that don't worry about the fact that you don't want to be a journalist anymore, because there's so many people that I work with who have all come into industry with absolutely no relevance to the degree that they talk in technical terms. But like David was saying, what we look for, and I think what any employer is looking for in that first interview, is a level of authenticity. So if you come in and just be yourself, but at the same time demonstrate your passion, and actually, you know, you've spent 3 years working in broadcast journalism, but your mind came to life when you started to think about PR, and get across that excitement and maybe demonstrate what it is you found fascinating about it. To bring something along with you to every interview, a point of view, or a little bit of what we talk about, the passion that you're showing. And if you have a pet project, work on a pet project, even if it's fashion, beauty, whatever that might be, and showcase your work just in terms of how your literary skills, and demonstrate that you're working with other people. Because like David was saying, it's all about relationships in PR, and getting out there and getting people on side, as well as being able to brilliantly articulate yourself. but that energy would really need to come across, and that's what I love. I hate leaving an interview where I feel I've had to do all the work.
Brilliant, thanks Rachel. Really good advice from everyone, I think there. I'm sure Lucy's been scribbling it down. There's a question in the chat saying, thinking about the future, could you, this is from Sophie, could you speculate on what you think will remain and what might be lost post-COVID? For instance, she's thinking around digital content. Is short form going to kind of fade away? Or because people are kind of actually now consuming more long form? Do we think that appetite for short form is reduced? And if it is it permanent, or is this just a sort of pandemic blip? Should we start with Juan? Go on, have a go.
Okay, you put me in the spotlight there, but
yeah.
yeah, it's yeah. Well, I would like to know about what Rachel and Diva can say about that. But I have some meetings already with the industry links that we have at Salford. It's very clear that for all of them, moving their production to work without commuting, like working from home, took one day, took nothing. And it seems to be something that I think that it will continue that way, in a way. So I don't think that after COVID, people will come to the way to work in the same way. There will be some changes, and probably we will have people meeting for I don't know, doing brainstorming sessions, or when they have to meet. But many other things will move and will continue online, working from home. That's
and in terms of like the short form, that's kind of the crux of the question. Like, do you think we'll still want to consume short form, or do you think we are moving towards, actually we don't want short form anymore, we want longer form content? Diva, what do you think about that?
It's a really, really fantastic question. And it's a question that, although it feels really now, we have been asking for about maybe 5, maybe even 10 years, because again, it's about future proofing and looking at how tech and digital evolves and how we react to it. I think ultimately the biggest point to raise is really about storytelling, and good storytelling always prevails, regardless of whether it's short form or long form, because we have to think about the purpose and the messaging of our content that we create. So sure, there is a big appetite in more short form content, but there's still appetite for long form content. And it comes down to, how does that storytelling connect with the audience that it's looking to send a particular message to? Now, to kind of raise your question about Quibi, I think, and maybe this is me being a little bold, but I think the reason why Quibi didn't work, Quick Bites, is almost a kind of level of arrogance. And I think as technology and consumption changes, we as big industry leaders, and especially in broadcasting, we need to remember that what we make doesn't just sit in one place. It can be across a multitude of different platforms. We need to be platform agnostic. And so setting something up as great as Quibi is, it's a brand new platform, and people are already using Facebook, they're using Snap, they're using TikTok, they're using YouTube. To introduce that level of a brand new platform into the ecosystem, it's a lot of work. So in this case, it was more of a challenge, because although there was great storytelling on there, and although it was what people wanted, it was kind of trying to go against people's habits, because it wasn't really going with the flow of where they actually are. It's trying to bring people to a new place without having established a relationship. And everything is connected to how we deal with our audience, how we identify our audience, and how do we work with them going forward. Always, 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 we have to think about the relationships.
I think that's really interesting, and I think it also shows the power of the audience and the power of the consumer, and those blurring of the lines between consumers and creators, which again is another that has evolved, you know, and now there's sort of, you know, there's no going back on that now. So consumers and creators are merged very much. I don't know, Juan, do you find that within a lot of your students, that this idea that they are both consumers and creatives and creators, and it changes how things happen.
Yeah. I mean, you every time that you're consuming something, right? You're a producer, you're a consumer, but you have to be on both sides and also understand that the products that you made are made for others as well. So a key part of this is empathy. I think is understanding who the user is, what are the worries, what are the concerns, and in a way that you can connect to them. I quite like what Diva was saying about good storytelling as a way, because at the end, and the fact that storytelling is platform agnostic, and no matter what will be the medium that we'll have in the future, whether it will be VR, AR, or will be whatever we have in front of our retina. Again, we are connecting with people through storytelling, through narratives. And that's what I think that the key word is, that it's something that connects, that makes you care. So if you make people care about anything, any content, that's what matters. And that is something that is not really technical. It's something that is a skill that you can transfer to a technical point of view, but it's something that we need to acquire in different ways. Even just like by telling things, just like talking.
Rachel, do you?
Yeah, we have this term, a planning term, or when we're talking to clients and agencies as well, about the meaningful role. Everything for a brand has to have a meaningful role, otherwise there's no point. It's not part of their story. The short, long form debate is always ongoing, but actually they all have a place. So every retailer that we work with, there is a customer journey, and across that customer journey and those interaction points, there's a need for different types of content. And as long as that content, whether it's short or long, has a genuine meaning, either to deepen a relationship or to just catch your eye and trigger a point of interest. And often we use short form for headline relevance or offer relevance, so that we can kind of get on the radar for the consumer, and then we deepen that relationship with the long form. So I think it will change, and the stories will change, but there'll always be a place for a mixture, I imagine. It will just adapt to the customer journeys as they change, or consumer journeys.
Rachel, I'm sort of changing direction slightly, but you picked up on it earlier. And I just think the idea that, do we think that this change in landscape of roles and jobs, and the jobs that we don't know exist and might be there in the horizon over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, how kind of positive and proactive do we think that's going to be around inclusion and diversity? It's such a, hugely important aspect of everything that we're all involved with. And I just wonder, are there things that we can put in place now that will really capture that and make sure that inclusion and diversity are really, really framed, center frame in a way?
I think that it has to. I mean, it's a non-negotiable now in every industry. Diversity, inclusion, sustainability, environment, it all counts. And it's so you actually have to work, especially in an established organisation. So, for instance, I work in Prestbury, so the drive time to Prestbury can be quite challenging, and you have to think about everything. Your recruitment strategy, for instance, don't just focus on one area, really kind of cast the net wide, because sometimes in the cut and thrust of industry, you're filling roles and you need them to be done quite quickly. And actually every employer and every company has to take a step back and challenge themselves, because what we know is the more diverse the team that you bring in, the greater the results, the more relevant your products will be and be more reflective. So it is a mandatory, and you are seeing now, we're seeing across a lot of the client bases that for the first time they're having diversity leads, sustainability leads, because it is an absolute must in order to remain relevant and protect your reputation as a brand as well. It needs to feel representative.
Diva, can you kind of come back on that, because it is really interesting, I think, how Rachel was looking at it from that McCann point of view as a big organization. I just wonder for you, because you've been in lots of different roles, working with lots of different organizations, how do you think it is going to impact?
Well, I think diversity and inclusion is an open and shut case in the sense that it just needs to happen.
Yeah.
And, you know, as someone who comes from an underrepresented background, this is quite passionate. This is quite passionate piece for me, because I think that diversity needs to reflect society, and society is made up of so many different people. So in your organization, if you are looking around and you are seeing similar people with similar points of view, then you're kind of going back into that silo effect of only having one voice, and it's represented by that particular group. That's it. And it's not really true, and it's not authentic of the society we live in now. So just taking a look at television, for instance, television is one of the hardest industries when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And it's constantly being wrapped because there needs to be more inclusion. And you know, the likes of Black Lives Matter helped to show that there really needs to be more kind of diversity, and there needs to be more equity. And part of that is ensuring that that representation happens at all different levels. So encouraging people from underrepresented backgrounds to enter positions that are entry level. And once they are there, assisting them to make sure that there's opportunity for them at a mid-level, and then hopefully sponsoring individuals to move them up to a decision-making level. And this is something that I think, you know, again, working for ITV, Carolyn McCall, our CEO, has been very vocal about it. Alex McMahon at Channel 4 has also been. Television wants to move in that way, and we want to make sure that the programming that we create is reflective of society, and that means everyone needs to be involved.
Brilliant. And Juan, just sort of picking up on that, what do you see the role of education and HE being able to play in this, in terms of, you know, the students that are coming, the people who are going out at the other end, the graduates and into industry? How do you think we can kind of support and develop inclusion and diversity, working alongside employers, thinking about what are the next jobs, where are we going with technology?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Let me think. So I really think that we in order to actually have diversity and inclusion, you don't just need to bring people with different backgrounds, but also you have to create an environment that recognizes that diversity and also see that like from the core as an advantage in order to have actually for this to work. And one of the things that we need to work sometimes hard with the students is teamwork at the end. It's like bringing people within teams, and that's the point where you start like creating those skills, those like the recognition that everybody no matter the background, no matter how you recognize them, as well as individuals within those teams, and that's something that it is surprisingly difficult sometimes for students to get as a skill. They tend to prefer to work as individuals instead of going to teams, because of course things get more messy when you're going to that sort of kind of work. But it's a vital step. It is the vital step that I think that create the skills that you need in the industry, of course.
Brilliant, thanks Juan. We're sort of coming to the final minutes of it. What a fascinating discussion, and I'd love to keep going with it, really. I'm really mindful of the fact that we haven't actually put any names on any roles that are going to appear in the future, which is really fascinating, and I love that. Actually, I think that's in one way that's actually really, really exciting. I don't know, do you want to sum up in a way what you think the next 3 years is going to look like for new entrants into this creative and digital technologies landscape? Let's start with Rachel.
Where do we start? Well, I think we've discussed it quite a bit, but to make sure that you have a multi-dimensional element to your CV or to your personal as well as professional life. I actually think that we will see in my world technology impacting how people work in teams and with clients. We call it workflow technologies. So how do you brief somebody? How do you get everybody's points of view? And we call them workflow management technologies. And actually a role that has just emerged, which I can see keep it coming, is we call them business process engineers, because actually the customer journey and the communication chains that we all have, I can be on WhatsApp, I can be on email, and I can be on Teams to exactly the same person. And we're finding that with clients, we have basically business process engineers, often re-engineered project managers, who work with clients and agencies to dissect who needs to do what and who needs to see what and how are they going to see that. And by mapping that process, it means that we can ensure that everybody who needs to be involved are in there. And actually it's probably a role that none of us would know existed. It wasn't very sexy. It's not a very advertising kind of term, business process engineer, but they are soon and rapidly becoming the single most important person in your team, because they tell everybody how to use the tech and where they need to be and make sure that we get it right first time.
Fantastic. You heard it here first. We'll be seeing it now, won't we? We're spotting the name. Fantastic. Juan, what do you think?
The name of the role of the future. I need to make a name. I will call it like.
You don't need to make a name if you don't think so, but the kind of idea of
I have a name. I think that the name of the future will be creative tech surfer. It will be a surfer, because it will be a guy that needs to be looking at the waves and be able to catch them.
Fantastic.
I think it's the best role, right?
I like that one. Yeah,
I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
You are, yeah. I think you can as well. Fantastic. Thanks, Juan. And finally, Diva, what do you reckon?
Well, I think there's everything to play for right now in the world of digital. And I think there are certain traditional ways of looking at, just technology that will still be applicable. I think things like project management, as Rachel and both Juan have said, that it's going to be really, really valuable in understanding how to connect and bridge everything together. And actually, just to answer Max Wilson's question kind of in this as well, where he says, do you think people will shift their attention from archaic technologies such as TV to the World Wide Web? I think archaic is a very kind of contentious term. I would like to think that technology is adaptable, and something like television, although, we still, because of mostly for our age, consider television as a box set kind of thing. I imagine television will change, as it has already with SVOD, AVOD, with BVOD, all your on-demand services that are available. And it's really about how do you consume content beyond just you as a creator or you as a consumer. There will always be a need for scripted content. There will always be a need for high-end content. And there will always be a need for people to provide this, regardless of whether it is on a device that sits in front of you or an environment that has actually been created around for you, like VR and AR.
Fantastic. Thanks, Diva. Well, I think hopefully we've predicted the future. It'd be great to come back in about 18 months' time and see if business process engineers are flying and creative tech surfers are flying as well. So big thanks to Diva, Juan and Rachel, and to Becky, who's appeared there. Becky, who organised it all and has done all the amazing organisation and producing of it. So thank you. And thanks to you all for your contributions.
Thank you very much.